Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. I have my wrong glasses. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and that all cell phones are set to vibrate. Any phone calls should be taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to staff or the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. During the conduct, excuse me, of the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present their case to the Commission. Remonstrators will have 10 minutes to present objections to the petition. Persons in support of the petition other than the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present support for the petitioner. Finally, the petitioner will close the public hearing portion of the presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed, no additional testimony will be heard unless it is solicited by members of the Commission during the question and answer phase of the Commission's deliberations. We have quite a few items on the agenda tonight, so Paul Gluckenberg will be our timer for this evening, so and he's a tough cookie, so just FYI. Subdivision plat and development plan petitions are ministerial requests, meaning that if the proposal meets the requirements set forth in the town's development ordinances, the Plan Commission must approve the request. In the interest of transparency, state law requires that the Plan Commission hold a public hearing even if the development proposal must be approved. Responses to public comments and questions may be given once the public hearing portion is closed. We understand that there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. And again, welcome to our meeting. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's take a roll call.
Catherine Ransberg.
Here.
Paul Guckenberger.
Here.
Bill Reed. Here. Greg Zusen.
Here.
Mason Pike.
Here.
Dave Kaufman.
Here.
We'll note that Jennifer Spencer is absent.
And we have a quorum. We would ask that conversations be taken outside and not held in the meeting room, please. Moving on to approval of meeting minutes from March 25th. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes? Are there any suggested edits, changes, commentary?
I have one on page 3, underneath 5.2, number 3, a recreation impact fee. We have put a number in there. That number was deleted, I believe. It was originally in there and then it came back, and the reason why it was taken out is over time that number may go higher than that number.
So it should just say a recreation impact fee shall be due at the time of permitting recreation lot.
Shall be assessed at the time of.
Right.
Okay.
And then the other thing was on, we indicate that I had left the meeting on 6.3. But on 6.4, you didn't show that I returned to the meeting. So it's probably not that it matters, but.
We don't want anyone to think you were slacking, Greg.
Well, that's all I have.
Does anybody else have any suggested edits or changes or commentary? Is there any objection to the suggested edits from Greg? Mr. Susan,
Move we accept the minutes as amended.
you have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting minutes are approved as amended. Moving on to the public comment section. This is the portion of the meeting at which anybody present can speak to items that are not on tonight's agenda. If you have something to say about something that's on the agenda, please wait until those items are called. But if there's something you would like to speak to that is not already on the agenda, now is the time to come forward and speak your piece. Is there anybody who would like to step forward and speak? Having nobody step forward, the public comment section portion of this meeting is closed. Do we have any requests for continuances or agenda modifications?
So we do have 2 requests for continuance. Staff will make the first one. That is for DPR 24-04 for the Avon High School tennis courts and parking lot addition. We have determined that they need an additional waiver, and also we discovered that they had not sent out their required notices, so it cannot be heard. So we are recommending continuance to the May 20th.
And is this a request being made by staff?
By staff.
Okay. Any discussion or comments on that request for a motion to continue? Sorry.
It was me. It was me. Yours.
Okay, very good. Technology is great, isn't it? Can I hear a motion granting the request for a continuance on this item?
I'll go and make that motion that we continue DPR 24-04 Avon High School tennis courts and parking lot expansion to the May 28th regular meeting.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, do we need to take a roll call on the continuance?
No.
Just on the, okay, I'm not always sure, okay. Is there anything else that needs to be continued or amended on the agenda?
Okay, it is green. Good evening. My name is Rebecca Phillips. I'm here on behalf of petitioner BP Avon LLC for petition ZA2404, the Wawa. The planning staff previously recommended support for this petition. This position was amended, and the planning staff is now recommending an unfavorable recommendation. We just received the amended staff report recommending that unfavorable recommendation this past Friday. Due to this change, we're requesting a continuance to the May hearing so that we can address the change staff report. We're working on revising the plan and the submission based upon that report, as well as the prior comments made at the first hearing. This is the petitioner's first request for a continuance.
Any discussion on the request? No?
Motion. I'll make a motion.
Motion?
I move we continue ZA 2404 Wawa to the May Plan Commission meeting.
You hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Agenda item is continued to next month.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a month. Any further agenda modifications or requests for continuances? In that case, moving on to old business. We're starting with Mission Foods.
You want staff to go first, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So you saw this one last month, and after a full hearing from the commission, it was continued to go back and work with staff on the proposed prohibited uses, as well as there was some discussion on the buffer yard adjacent to the residential to the east. So they are requesting a rezoning of 13 acres from the R1 to the I3 for industrial uses. There is no significant land use history on the property. It is developed with 2 single-family homes and some agricultural activities currently. Again, 13.21 acres on East County Road 100 South. This is an exhibit of the current zoning. The site is outlined in white. Town of Plainfield is to the west, and then county jurisdiction land, residential single-family dwellings to the east, and industrial to the south in the town. This is for the expansion of the Mission Foods, which is located immediately to the west in the town of Plainfield. It's an expansion of their industrial facility onto this use. The comprehensive plan does not have an overt recommendation for the site, and when that happens, we look to the nearby land use recommendations and the underlying zoning to determine what the best recommendation for the site is. So here is the future land use cluster map. The site is right here in red. Right here in red. Not outlined very well on this map. So that its closest recommendation is the I3 circular designation to the south for light industrial, or for light industrial, and then it's zoned I3. And then the light industrial recommendation to the northwest. These are the surrounding uses, again, residential to the immediate east and north, and then industrial to the west and south. At the last meeting, we had a lot of discussion about the buffer yard to the north. The UDO requires a 30-foot buffer yard, which they were agreeing to or planned to put in at the last meeting. But an increased buffer yard could be required, or you could put in additional landscape and screening. And the petitioner has offered to put in the green giant arborvitae planted at 30 feet, every 30 feet for this site. These are some schematics that the petitioner submitted, and you'll see that in his presentation. So I want to point out on this site, this is the site plan you saw last month. And along this northern line is where the 30-foot is required. Except that site plan doesn't show 30 feet. So it was confusing to me that the full buffer yard wasn't being shown. So I requested the petitioner amend their site plan to then show what is actually required by the UDO, which is when we get this site plan. So it's a similar layout of everything, except the full 30 feet is now shown in here. They gain the additional feet from moving the whole site further south, so the strip along, or further west. So the strip adjacent to their existing facility has shrunk, and then the buffer yard's grown bigger adjacent to the residential to the east. We are not reviewing the site plan. This is for a zoning amendment. But I did ask them to show that the 30-foot buffer yard and that that would be provided on this site. In general, staff recommends approval of this. We do think some of the information originally was vague and that they weren't showing a site plan that we thought met standards. We believe this current one does meet standards. And then the increased landscaping that they're proposing would be sufficient to buffer the residential to the east. We did go over at the last meeting, Ian provided to you a list of uses that he thought should be prohibited on the site. And the petitioner indicated a little bit of concern with a few of them, not that they wanted to add additional uses, but that their proposed use, it could be interpreted by some, would be unintentionally prohibited by these uses that were recommended. So I worked with the petitioner to amend the list of prohibited uses that they are agreeing to. The first one being number 6, just indicating that the food and beverage is permitted use, that the manufacturing use that's listed there would not inadvertently prohibit the food processing that they're doing. Number 12, they were concerned that any distribution from the site associated with the site would be inadvertently prohibited. Staff's reason for including that was we didn't want a truck freight terminal, something that wasn't a building, it was just trucks in and out of the site. So we think we are in agreement there. And then the last one, they just want to make sure that the storage that happens to go on inside the building would not be prohibited by the original list of uses. So staff is recommending a favorable recommendation to the town council with this list of prohibited uses as amended, and the landscape buffer of the 30-foot tall giant green arborvitae. I did have one, the petitioner's representative could address this on their presentation. It's shown well. In the entrance, there looks to be some staging of 2 trucks along the street. I'll show it here. They're right there, right here. And it almost looks like a pull-off area and some truck staging has been put there as an intention to have trucks waiting there for some reason and not just an ingress egress lane. And we want to ensure that that is not the intention.
Is that that pullover section on 100 South you're referencing right now?
Yeah, right
Okay.
here. And I apologize, I didn't see that till right before the meeting, but we would like that addressed. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I did provide to you a letter from the fire department. I had some extensive conversations with our building commissioner and the fire department about the site and if there were any concerns regarding what was going to be inside this building. And both of them conveyed to me that it would have to meet ordinances and state code for building, but they would, when the building is constructed, they would get from the company a list of all the commodities that are inside the building. And if the commodities didn't meet state code for how they were stored, stacked, or what have you, then they wouldn't be permitted. And if they wanted to go outside of those requirements, it would need a variance of the building code. And if that were considered, they would then require additional sprinklers or additional things to make what they're having on site safe. I'm not part of the fire department or know the building code, but that is the response I got. And I gave you an email from the fire department as well.
Now, the issue of, you're talking about proper storage of these things, but the issue of the identification of the specific items has already been addressed. So there's no issue. I believe at the last meeting we talked about that, and there's no issue right now with relating to what is being stored there. All of that is permitted.
Correct. It would
And
be
it's just-
permitted with the rezoning.
And you're talking about proper storage and safety and fire prevention type
Yes,
stuff.
I was told to make sure that they make sure they know what's going in the building. And at their annual inspections, they make sure it's being held to that standard.
Okay. Questions for staff?
I have a couple questions. On the criterion, on criterion 3, this staff indicates that the ideal use for this property would be some sort of transitional use between industrial and to the west and residential to the north. So it's like, I'm reading into this, an in-between, whether it meets the criterion or not.
So ideally, when you have residential and industrial, you want a buffer use in between. You want an office use, you want a multifamily use, you want institutional, a church or something like that, ideally. But every site has got to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And this site is a little bit unique in that it's sandwiched between the single-family dwelling and the industrial. And this current user of the site in Plainfield, it's a logical expansion of their operation. And if they're already there, they're already close to them, and it's just a logical expansion. So ideally, yes, we would like to see an intervening use that is a buffer. But
Okay.
we also look at sites on a case-by-case basis, and oftentimes we recommend approval of expansions of existing uses that are there and have been appropriate at that location.
Okay.
And we don't have, it's not included in the use map. There's nothing on the use map that would say a preference for one or the other, unfortunately.
Correct.
And then on criterion 4, that the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction. So staff indicates that residential homes may have the potential to affect property values of those abutting residents. So it doesn't meet criterion 4 based off staff's evaluation.
I would say it does not, but I would remind you that the criterion are a total. So you think of all 5 criterion altogether to determine if you think the rezoning is appropriate. Each criterion in and of itself does not have to perfectly be met for a rezoning.
Okay. And if I could continue here on the prohibited uses. So if manufacturing, fabricating, and assembly heavy is prohibited, except for food and beverage operation, how is heavy food and beverage different than any other heavy manufacturing, fabricating, and assembly?
So the ordinance lists off what is considered manufacturing heavy. And in that category, it lists hazardous materials. And some would argue that flour could be a hazardous material. So that's why they wanted to make it clear that it is permitted. We want to eliminate that category as a whole. Initially, staff did not think that it belonged in that category. We think it belongs in the light one. But the petitioner themselves was concerned that it could be read that they would be prohibited. And we just wanted to just add it on as a clarification.
Okay,
So
thank you.
this is just making sure that there's no future, that it's not open to interpretation, that it's explicitly saying, even though most people might say, well, obviously it's not heavy industrial,
Right,
but this is now putting that to rest.
correct.
Further questions for staff? Okay, we'll invite the petitioner to come forward.
Good evening, commission members. For the record, my name is Tyler Oakes. I'm with Bose McKinney and Evans. here on behalf of Gruma Corp., or as many know them as Mission Foods. As staff has kind of reiterated, and I'll try to not belabor the points. This is our third time here. We're requesting a rezone from an R1 to an I3. This is going to be an extension of the plant next door that's been operating since, I believe, 2019, 2020. Just as a quick background, Mission Foods is the #1 tortilla producer in the country. They're growing at a very fast rate, and they'd like to keep that going. So this next door area is going to be used to help. It's going to be extra distribution, extra manufacturing, and office building. They're really excited about getting this going, and it's going to be a great help to the plant that's been going very well in Plainfield. To address a couple of the questions, I do just want to reiterate the exchange that just occurred. This was the intent with the condition was wholly just to clear up any ambiguity. We had assurance from staff since the first meeting that this use did not fall under the heavy manufacturing, but based on some ambiguity with the language, we just want to be wholly sure this is the case. We still feel that we don't fall under heavy manufacturing, but just wanted to be clear and make it easy for everybody going forward. Additionally, to address staff's question, my understanding is the trucks there, they have no intention of storing trucks at the front or anything like that. I think it was more so just to show the flow of traffic and trucks using that ingress egress as they pull into the building. But there would be no intention of storing trucks there for any purpose of that matter. So hopefully, if you have further questions, please let me know. But hopefully that should be addressed. Further, we do want to reiterate that with this site plan, as opposed to the last meeting, this is a concept plan, but staff had stated, and we had no issue with, showing the full 30-foot buffer. We intend to honor that. As code suggests, there are landscaping requirements. We feel that we've gone above and beyond with those. Those green giants are massive. Just to kind of reiterate, they typically range anywhere from 30 feet tall to 60 feet tall, fully grown, and they grow very fast, which is why they're typically a preference for landscape screening. They grow about 3 to 5 feet per year on average. So right out of the gate, they'd start to be growing really, really fast, which is why we're so in favor of them. We would have them, as the picture was shown earlier, we would have them so that you're not really able to see from the residential properties to the facility, which is the intent. We understand that the residents don't want to look out their backyard and see this, and we think that the trees are a much prettier view. So we have no issue meeting that. Another issue just to address would be, I know at the last meeting there were some issues regarding the flower and the combustibility of the flower. I checked with Gruma Corp. They have never had a flower ignited fire or explosion at their plants. They're very protective of their process and proprietary in that sense, but it would obviously be very bad for them for an explosion or a fire to happen. So they've taken very, very increased steps to ensure that there's essentially a 0% chance of any combustibility. They're confident in their process. The Plainfield one's been running very smoothly. I know Linda had talked with the fire department. My clients are happy to have the fire department come in, happy to work and cooperate with them, just as they've done at the Plainfield facility, to make sure that there's no issues there. The last thing they want to do is have anybody around feeling unsafe. So that is of utmost importance to them. Do want to emphasize too as well, this is a concept plan. And so although on the back of the property, they've drawn a drainage plan as well as kind of how the flow of rainwater would go in the event of draining. My clients are confident that flooding would not occur. We're happy to work diligently with the town of Avon as well as any drainage board, rainwater maintenance, that sort of thing, to ensure that any retention pond is up to state code, is up to Avon code, and to avoid any flooding that's going to occur to any of the other properties. That's a very big priority for my client. The last thing I want to address is the property value comment. While it is a criteria and Linda had addressed and staff had addressed, it's a factor, we still believe that it's not going to depreciate any property values. This is an area that is already abutting industrial property, specifically, I believe, to the east, I believe. And so or be the south, apologies. So they already have industrial to the south. There's already a lot over that this is an expansion up to the west. So it's not really changing any of the topics in the area. And so it remains what we believe to not lower those property values. On top of putting in what we think is going to be pretty good looking landscaping to not, have that site sticking out. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Would respectfully request a favorable recommendation and happy to answer anything. Thank you.
Questions for the petitioner?
Regarding the east property line, you talked about the 30-foot giant trees. Is there also going to be a berm there, or is it just going to be the trees?
My understanding is there would not be a berm because of the trees, but if we need to put a berm in, that's something that we're happy to potentially discuss. But for right now, our understanding, based on the requirements listed in the code and the ordinance, was those 30 to 60 foot trees. And I think originally staff had said they'd be placed 30 feet apart from each other. They would be closer than that. It just depends. The trees grow, I think, 8 feet wide. So it would just be whatever is healthy for the trees to properly grow would be the spacing in between them.
Okay. You had mentioned every 8 feet last time. So if that was the condition, would that meet, would you agree to that?
I think I want to reiterate, we would agree to smaller than the 30, but again, it depends on the tree itself. So we just want to make sure if an arborist tells us we need 10 feet instead of 8, the whole point of the trees is to ensure that there's no gaps in between the trees.
So if the condition was that it would provide a dense buffer.
Yep.
That would meet what you're talking about.
Correct. We'd have no problem meeting that. Again, it's the intent that you're not seeing the factory through the trees. That's why they chose the trees that they did. They want to be respectful of the neighbors in that regard.
Would the trees be in a straight line or would they be staggered?
That's something that's talked about, and we haven't, I think, come to a final decision on that. I think we're going to work with somebody who's more experienced in that realm than I am, to whatever is best. If it's going to provide better coverage to have them staggered, that's something my client's prepared to do. If it's better to just have them in a straight line, we're fine to do that as well. I think it ultimately is just going to be whatever is going to give the most dense coverage is the option they'll go with.
And I'm looking at that dense coverage as well as a sound barrier. And if you're willing, I don't know what a typical berm is. Do you know, Linda? Is it 5 feet, 7 feet?
We have a standard for the width and slope of the ordinance.
So whatever our ordinance, so if you're willing to put that, we can include our standard berm, and then you'd have your staggered 30-foot trees on top of that?
Yeah, that's something we can consider. So you'd want the berm and then the trees planted on top of the berm?
I think that's something that would probably be better addressed as we get further into right now we're just doing zoning. So I think that is something that would be better addressed once they present us with the final plan.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to address a berm further down the road. That's like I said, we're certainly open to one. And if that's a deal breaker down the road, we're happy to have that discussion and potentially commit to it down the road.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we would, do we have anybody signed up to remonstrate?
The first person on our list is Tim Foist.
Good evening. Could you state your name and address, please?
Tim Foist. I live at 1096 Foxford Drive, and I back up to this whole Mission Foods project. You're talking about that buffer. Willard lives all the way down at the end of the street where they put the warehouses in to the south of us. He's had nothing but flooding problems. If they're going to put this buffer in, they need to lay off 10 yards, at least 10 yards, put a perimeter drain all the way down that property line and let it run to a storm sewer or that retention pond. Because if they put that buffer in right on top of our property, that water is all going to flow into our property. I mean, there's no doubt about it. because that last rain that we had 3 inches, my backyard was flooded. And you just think what you put a mound in there, all that water is going to flow right down into there's 8 houses on our property line, all the way down through there. And it's going to flood every one of them. And if they lay off 10 yards and put a perimeter down there, a 6-inch perimeter, and run it to a storm sewer or that retention pond in the back to alleviate some of this water, because that's the only way that you're going to get rid of this problem. I mean, it's not going to go away. Because, I mean, that 3-inch rain that we just had, my backyard was flooded. And, I mean, it's flat back there now. And you say you want to put a mound back there? Where's all that water going to go? In everybody's backyard. But, I mean, if they would lay off 10 yards and put a perimeter all the way down the property line, all the way down through her, 6-inch, and bed it with rock, and then put the mound in, it would take care of that excess water and it wouldn't flood our backyards, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Because Willard down at the end of our street, he's had 3 inches of water in his garage 3 times from them warehouses because they didn't put the perimeter drain in right. And he's had them back out there 3 times to try to get the problem corrected. It's still not corrected. And if they're going to do this project, they need to do it right the first time, because if you don't do it right the first time, we'll never get somebody back out there to make it right.
Thank you.
The next person,
Another thing, did you find out about the hazmat?
Sir, you need to have a seat. Thank you.
the next person is Josh Gallion.
Hi, thanks for your time for the planning commission. I just I'll reiterate what Tim said about the water thing.
Can you
But
state
I
your
also
name-
wanted to,
Name and address.
oh, sorry, yeah, Josh Gallion, 1144 Foxford Drive. I wanted to bring up, I don't think it's been brought before, the issue of the smell that's coming from the existing plant. It's day and night, consistently smells like oil, chips, all the remnants of the manufacturing process. And that is with it being as far as it is away now. And what has been presented earlier has just saying, oh, we're just moving it closer. Well, you're moving all of that stuff closer. The winds predominantly come from the west. They blow all of that waste, air, whatever you want to call it, all back into our properties. So that's the main concern that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
That is all that's signed up.
Is there anybody else who would like to come forward and speak on this agenda item? Having nobody else come forward, the remonstrators portion of this is closed. Would the petitioner like to provide some rebuttal?
This will be very quick. Again, for the record, Tyler Oaks, Bose McKinney and Evans on behalf of petitioner Gruma Corp. In terms of the drainage, I just wanted to reiterate that while it's now conceptual, I know that Gruma Corp is going to work with the town of Avon as well as engineers in ensuring that there's no flooding that occurs on that property, to those properties, excuse me. If that has to be some sort of drain down the road, and that's recommended to us by Avon, that's something that they'll certainly explore. Right now, the engineers and architects that designed the site plan are comfortable with the retention pond and how it is. But once we go into this process and work with the town, if that's something that needs to change to ensure that flooding doesn't happen, I'm sure that's not going to be a problem with Gruma Corp. They certainly don't want that to occur with the neighbors. That's pretty much at the forefront. So the last thing I just kind of want to add, because there is residential and there is, industrial, and the intent is to kind of bridge that gap. This is kind of the way I think of it as a diet version of their current plant that's right there to the west. And so for us, this does act as some sort of transition because it's not a full scale production plant like their current one is in across the border in Plainfield. It is a bit of a smaller production plant, which we think represents a nice transition given the fact that it is an extension of that current plant. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question for the petitioner. I was by that location a couple of weeks ago, and I know that the fence around the plant for Mission Foods, they control both the southern fence and the northern fence, which the northern fence will give you access to 100 South, correct?
I believe so, yes.
So my question is, are you going to still control the egress ingress off the southern fencing area where other tenants within the industrial park can come right down through there? Or is that strictly going to be used just for Mission Foods the way it's currently set up?
My understanding is it would be used for Mission Foods because we have that interconnecting road that's going to be between the two plants. That's currently the thought process. But again, if that's something that needs to be addressed with the town where they feel that it needs to be opened up, they can. And just to clarify, is it possible to get the map pulled up? I just want to make sure I have it clear. So you're talking about like where the trucks are, that entrance on the left-hand side of the site, correct?
Yep.
And so can you restate your question with that?
Well, your fence goes to that entry there, and then your fence is then at the other southern property line of Mission Foods. So basically, you have it all gated off.
Correct.
You control it. So my question was, once you build your concept or site plan, are you going to open up the southern fence to allow other tenants within the industrial park to get egress ingress to 100 South?
I don't believe so. I don't believe that'd be the case. If there's a traffic issue and that's recommended by the town that we need to, then yes, we'd open it. But my understanding is no, that would be reserved for interconnectivity between the two Mission Foods facilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have one correction to make in the recommendation of the staff report. I put in the prohibited uses, but I neglected to put in the 30-foot tall green giant arborvitae as a second condition, which it was on your presentation, but it was not contained in the written staff report. So I just want to make sure that's added.
Discussion?
If this zoning map amendment is approved, I think that was a good exchange as well as information about the potential unintended consequences. Again, the desire to provide that buffering between the site and the neighbors. Like we want to, provide that buffer, but if it's designed in a way that could lead to flooding, then that's obviously an unintended consequence. So I appreciate the comments and conversations around that, making sure that if this does go forward, that's adequately addressed at the next stage.
I agree. I'm glad that we have community members who've shown up to bring those to our attention, even though tonight's hearing is just about a zoning change. We now are, before we have a plan in front of us, and the petitioner has been made aware of concerns of the neighbors in the community, and they can take that into consideration as they develop more fully develop their plans for us. So I always appreciate input from the community.
So I have a question for Greg. During the development plan review, or as you review the plans, one of the things when we talk about water runoff, and this has been brought up in several cases previously, the developer of a lot is responsible and required to make sure that there's no runoff leaving the lot, right? So that's where the detention ponds, as you look at the plans, that water is contained on the lot. Is that correct? As much as possible?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, the water has to run off. The idea is to control that runoff via detention,
Right.
And reduce the discharge rate by which the water does run off the site.
So if we're talking about conditions, and then that's where, when we're talking about trees or mounds or anything, that's really thinking, well, are we going to add that as a condition? does that inhibit your ability to determine that and to ensure that the runoff doesn't go the wrong way?
No, I think based on the context of the conversation that has been had, I think that the developer and the petitioner has been put on notice that there are issues there about that. What would it be, the western boundary, or is it eastern? Eastern boundary. And that some type of provision should be implemented into the design plan to encapsulate that drainage on the backside of those slopes. They can't just free fall sheet flow off those mounds into the neighbors, especially if there's issues now. Now, that being said, if the gentleman identified that there's a lot of flat areas in there. So if there's water standing in their properties now, there's probably going to be water standing in the properties after the fact. But what the development is put to task to is to not increase anything that goes that way and to detain it.
Okay.
So they won't be fixing problems that are off the property, the subject property, but they definitely won't be negatively impacting off the subject property limits.
So as one of the demonstrators had indicated, if there's a need for additional drainage, is that something that you would identify?
Yeah, there's requirements within the ordinance that the engineers to provide topographic information a couple hundred feet outside the property limits even, so that we can see, is there any off-site water that might be being impeded by berms, or are they showing that the sheet flow is going into an area that may cause problems? So we should be able to see that based on the submittals.
So do we need to make that a condition for that work to be done to make sure? Because I agree that, once the development's done, it's hard to fix it. It's better to do it before in design.
It's a requirement within the SMO and the SDSM.
Okay.
So.
Right. Thank you.
One more thing for you, Greg, then to go one step further. I talked about berming because when you read the comments, safety, potential noise issues and stuff, I figured you create a berm, block some sound, you put the trees there. It sounds like that's not going to work, or it's not what the neighbors want. So I'm trying to identify what would benefit them. At the same time, maybe it's not going to benefit them. So when do we look at berms, or should we have a berm there, or shouldn't we have a berm there?
That would be addressed at the next stage, I think. Right now that we're just talking about zoning. And I think you raise it's a balancing question. I think if we're talking about the berms, do the berms, they help to address one problem, but then they may create another problem. And I think that is an issue that we would address at the next phase. Right now, we're just talking about the zoning, but I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is something that needs to be, do we have a berm and then trees behind the berm? Do we have a berm with trees on top of it? And I think that's the sort of thing that gets discussed and with the petitioner and with the staff, and then is brought to the council at the next stage.
If I could, I would disagree. If we want to make that a condition, that's something we ought to discuss now. If we decide it's not a condition, then I agree, it would be at the next stage. But if we are wanting to make that a condition of approval of a recommendation, I think we definitely need to discuss that now.
But what would that condition be? Because we can't make condition without knowing what we're dealing with. We haven't had any, maybe you can tell me, we haven't had anybody out there from the town, at least to my knowledge, it has gone out and said, here's what the grading looks like, here's what the water flow direction looks like, how can we make a condition? Unless it's something just very generic that is already built into the ordinances. I guess, and I don't think we should be micromanaging, especially at this stage, what happens with effectively landscaping.
I can't speak professionally or as an expert on sound or anything. Obviously, the visual block is there. But I guess I'll defer to Ms. Albrand as to what the ordinance requires. And if there are options in that ordinance and you want to stick the petitioner with one of those options, then that would be obviously a commitment to that. It's like, no, you're going to do option A. I think that's what Mr. Gutenberg, you're kind of deferring to, is that, to figure that out. So I don't know what is required off the top of my head in that buffer. If something is required, then yes, the next step, Ms. Albrand will be looking at that with the development plan. Is the landscape plan right? Is the mound the right height and all that? I'll be looking at the drainage. Does the drainage work? But at this point, again, to Mr. Gutenberger's point, if you want to nail them down to a specific treatment on that east side, now's the time.
And we are talking about, as a condition, 30-foot arborvitae trees planted here close enough to make a dense buffer. So we're already into landscaping. So I don't disagree that we ought to talk about the mounding. Whether we add that as a condition or not is something we ought to talk about.
I think can be a distinction made, though, between trees and something much more complicated, like trying to address drainage. And we don't know if the berm is going to help with the drainage or if it's going to make it worse. And I think the trees are a much simpler. There, we're talking about primarily sound and visual blockage. The gentleman was talking about drainage, and drainage is a lot more complicated, which is why I don't think that's a condition that we need to address at this hearing. And I don't think we should.
I mean, could we to kind of arrive at a common ground, build a carve out, basically say something to the effect of a requirement, a condition that the trees will be put in place as well as a berm unless town experts determine that it's contrary, it's not in the best interest for flood planning. So that way it gives the town staff and our contractors that the ability to, come back to us and say the berm's not right or needs to be shorter, but then it does provide that requirement on the petitioner.
I think that's a fair compromise because we don't want to tie the hands of the people who are the experts at this. I'm not an expert at it, I can tell you that. So,
But you take all that field tile out of that.
sir, this is not the time for you to be speaking.
I'm just telling you, you gotta
Sir,
take that field tile.
Sir, this is not, you had your chance. This is not the time for you to be speaking. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. Anybody want to present a motion?
So question for our council. So to add, as I see the proposed language, is the condition about the trees built into this? I'm just trying to figure out the wording. So if you could help us with that.
So if you were going to mimic what you were suggesting earlier, it would be the 8-foot or the whatever was originally proposed with the 8 feet of trees. Do you have that?
The arborvitae.
Yes. And I would just say, and a berm unless staff recommends otherwise.
Okay.
On the berm only though.
Or say on the hill if that's what you want. I mean, for these situations, if you really want something, now is the time to do it, but these things do get.
Yeah. And I'm glad you
later.
brought that up, Mason, because I want to see the 30-foot arborvitae trees planted to create a dense buffer.
Right.
The berm, I would leave up to the design experts to control, make sure there's no water issues.
I agree.
That'd be my,
Okay. Let me give this a try. I move that we forward a favorable recommendation to the town council for ZA 23-06 Mission Foods Expansion, a zoning map amendment to rezone 13.28 acres from R1 to I3 with the condition that they plant the 30-foot plus arborvitae trees at a spacing of 8 or greater feet, period, as well as a condition to install a berm unless staff determine that it is not in the best interest of flood planning.
I think
Plus
you need
the
to put subject to
prohibited
the
uses,
commitments.
Subject
from
to the commitments outlined in the staff report.
plus the prohibited uses as staff
That's,
defines in the report.
that's the commitments.
Okay, let's try that again.
So what needs to be added?
Just saying, subject to the.
Well, as long as they've captured it, it doesn't matter who's saying it,
Right, right.
as long as they've captured it correctly.
Minimum.
The planting of the arborvitae in such a fashion that a complete buffer is provided. Because again, the petition, I think that's a great point, like the arborvitaes or the arborists are going to know the appropriate planting distance between each tree. So we don't want to.
And the ordinance says 30 feet. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Ordinance says 30, and your
Every
recommendation from Ian last month was 8 feet.
okay, try it again, Mason.
Go with 8 feet unless it determined the larger width is necessary for the plant.
I'm not going to, so what's written here, as well as a condition that the arborvitae trees buffers be installed so as to obstruct the view to the development. Again, I'm not going to put in feet because again, needs to be determined later, right?
I will second your motion if you will amend it to include the prohibited uses that are defined in the staff report.
Okay, do me a favor, write it out real quick. I need you guys to like,
That,
we're piecemealing this.
that the
so-
prohibited uses, this is the wording, the prohibited uses in the staff report, as defined in the staff report, is a condition.
Isn't that covered by the commitments outlined in the staff report?
I didn't hear him say that when you read his motion, so I'm sorry, I missed that.
So if we just add the
Are we
add the
covered?
phrase subject after 1-3, subject to the recommendation.
Subject to the following conditions. One,
Or subject to the prohibited uses as recommended by staff. In addition, subject to condition 1, arborvitae trees, green giant arborvitae trees shall be planted no more than 8 feet unless suggested otherwise by what, arborist? I don't know. This shouldn't be this hard. And condition 2. Paul?
I'm looking at staff that was the motion complete based off your recommended language.
You want me to read it back to you?
That would be great.
Okay. I heard that that he's motioning to forward a favorable recommendation of the town council for ZA 23-6 Mission Foods expansion, the zoning map amendment from R1 to I3 with subject to the conditions of staff's prohibited uses as listed in the staff report, and that a buffer or screening shall consist of 30-foot tall trees to be planted at 8 foot on center unless a further distance is recommended by an arborist.
And then we need to have the condition relating to the berm. What would you like that to say, Paul?
Mason had
Or
that, it's not my language.
that a berm be installed unless staff recommends otherwise due to flood planning.
Second,
Everybody happy with the motion? Any discussion? Okay, let's take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Season,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
Okay, moving
My
on.
only comment is when this gets to the town council, I was a little disappointed on the vagueness. And we talked a couple times about concept plan and site plan in your discussion. I don't know which is which, if you've got a site plan that you haven't shown us yet. So when you do come to the town council, I hope you don't have this vagueness and maybe have a site plan.
Can I address that
Sure.
real quick? Yeah, so just for clarification, I may have used them interchangeably, but ultimately we're abiding by what staff has required us to do. And because it's a rezone and at this stage, that's what we're required to do. I personally, I mean, from a rezone standpoint, we've hit all the requirements that staff has given to us. And I'm not sure how we make it less vague at this point, other than, really, I don't know, because we've shown essentially what the outlay is going to look like. We've shown ingress, egress, the ways to get in, what a retention pond is going to be. We've added additional things to a traditional concept plan. So it may seem more like a site plan than is required, but that was just to kind of work, we've really enjoyed working with staff. They requested it, and it's not hard for us to add, so we had no problem doing that. But we've met every requirement necessary based on ordinance and code. We can have something, I guess, more specific, but I'm not sure what that would entail. I know that as Greg had mentioned, there's requirements from the town that we have to go to. That's an extra step, working with, drainage and that sort of thing. And I assume the town council is going to watch this back and has an idea of what to look for and those type of things. But there is an extra level of scrutiny we have to pass going forward. I guess just to address your question, I'm not so sure how we make it less vague.
We are finished with this agenda item, so
Thank you all for your time.
Moving on to ZA 2402.
So this is another case that was heard in its entirety last month, and the commission had some concerns about the permitted uses and that there was no use identified. But to recap from last month, this is a request to rezone 0.88 acres from the I-2 to the C2. It has no significant land use history and it is currently improved with one single-family residence. That is at 8447 East US Highway 36, and it is within the Tier 1 US 36 overlay. This is its location here on the zoning map, outlined in white. It is currently zoned I-2, again, but improved residentially. There is C2 to the west. There is more I-2 to the east, although the corner piece across the street is used residentially. Beyond that is a commercial business. To the south immediately is a house that's zoned industrially, and then beyond that is a residential subdivision within the jurisdiction of the county. This is an up-close aerial photo. To the north is a residential subdivision also within the jurisdiction of the county. 3 of the residences front on 36. To the west is a commercial business with a variety of commercial uses of varying intensity. The 2017 future land use cluster map recommends this area for area retail. Area retail is shown on this map, I guess not ideally, but the site here is in the center in red, in this lighter red outline. And then this brownish tannish color that's over most of the map is the area retail recommendation from the comprehensive plan. So this request would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The petitioner, again, does not have any concrete details on development. They don't have a user identified. They are wanting the zoning to market the property. I did ask them when I met with them if they could come up with a conceptual site plan just to show how it could be developed, because I myself was struggling to see if the site was large enough to accommodate a commercial business, all its parking, all its buffering that's needed. So I made that request to the petitioner, and they did provide that to me. But I just want to point out that the commission should give reasonable consideration to the adjacent residential uses. So here's the conceptual plan provided to me. Very conceptual, that this is just to show if the zoning was granted, how it could be developed, showing that a building does fit on there with the parking and with the required buffer yards.
Question before you move on.
Yep.
So the 3 parcels are on that concept plan.
Correct.
I thought one of them was still going west of the road cut. That is not included? That house there?
Going.
No, this covers the 3 parcels.
No, not yet, sir. Right now, we're talking about staff.
And
That's right.
I'll ask that question then to the
Yeah.
petitioner. That's fine.
This is those 3 parcels.
Okay.
Which site were you?
Well, I was thinking it also in the 3rd parcel. I didn't know it was the one south of the 2
Oh, okay.
in front of it. I thought it was the one across the road west.
Okay. This is the correct 3 parcels, yes. So again, with the hesitancy of the commission, not knowing the use that would be going here, staff met with them, proposed a list of prohibited uses that we wouldn't want to see on the site, and gave that to the petitioner for their comment, and they gave some feedback, and this is the list that we've agreed upon. The first one, we had concerns, we always do, over animal sales and services, that there could be outdoor dog runs, or like a doggy daycare or kennel with outdoor runs, and that close to residential would not be desirable. So they've agreed to limit the outdoor operations of that kind of business. Animal sales and service, all others would include animal businesses that are not pets, household pets. Retail sales and service for anything outdoor, so we don't think any outdoor display would be desirable. Retail sales and service, repair, special handling are some of the undesirable uses in the C2 districts, such as massage businesses or gun sales, that type of thing. Pawn shop, automobile services we included because we worry about auto services when they have like the bay doors open, and there's a lot of noise coming from auto services. We did propose to include auto sales and rental. They indicated they would like to keep rentals of 15 cars or less, but the sales would be excluded. Contractors, we excluded just because of the outdoor amount of materials that tend to get left outside with contractors, recycling drop-off facilities, and then an auto towing yard. Last month, we were recommending approval with no commitments. Now staff has amended their request to recommend approval with this list of prohibited uses. And I'd be happy.
Questions for staff?
Yeah, Linda, so these 10 prohibited uses, do we have a master list of all uses, and are these just literally copied and pasted from that?
Correct.
How many total uses are there? So there's 10 here. How many total potential uses are there?
In the C2?
Yeah. I'm just trying to, and the reason I ask this question is, this is what I struggle with, is when we don't know what the potential development is, are we painting ourselves in a corner and potentially opening up to a use that we could later down the road not be open to? And so knowing the total number would help me at least.
Sure.
And if it's getting up there, you could ballpark it too, that's fine.
About 32.
Okay, so there's still 2/3 of uses that could still be used, okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
we've left in, restaurants, basic, your beauty shops, offices, all regular, general commercial type of uses, just took out the heavy stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Question, Linda, on your automobile motorcycles, you are permitting at least up to 15 cars for a car rental facility. Was that your request or is that the petitioner's request or how do we come up with that?
I proposed to the petitioner that that whole category be eliminated, and they said that they wanted to keep it open for car rental only, not sales, for up to 15 cars. I did not think that was that objectionable of a use for a car rental facility.
Well, I'm just thinking we have an express or enterprise car rental down the road, which obviously not that far away. Then you have another buy here, pay here, not that far away. So I didn't know how many more of those do we want. That's why I was wondering if that was their request or.
It was our request that it be removed, more for the sales part of, so it wouldn't have a used car lot with all of its signage and things like that.
And it's not our job to pick and choose how many of any kind of business we have within our town borders.
I'll bring up, because I also I don't agree, and we'll talk to the petitioner about this. I don't agree that we ought to include that use as a permitted use. I would like to see that as a total prohibited use, as staff has indicated. And they put this in here to represent what the petitioner asked for. So I'd like to ask the petitioner about that when they come forward.
Any further questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a question. In general, light industrial is less restrictive than commercial? It seems like that was said last month. I was wondering of these prohibited uses, if it were to stay I3 or whatever, how many of those would be allowed with that?
The contractor's business would be allowed. I'd have to go through it, but the current zoning has heavier uses with outdoor storage allowed. But these particular uses, a lot of them would not be permitted in the I2. The general contractor is the only one that sticks out to me that would be
But
permitted.
I3 in general would allow outdoor storage,
Yes.
which we're not
Correct.
referring, right? So, okay.
Bless you.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, have the petitioner come forward.
Hi, good evening. My name is Drew Kelly, 5332 Temple Avenue. Thank you for the chance to come back up and for considering our petition to rezone. So thank you for Linda summarizing everything. I think you've kind of heard our pitch before, so I'll just maybe hit a couple bullet points and address a couple of questions that were asked. So one, this is thank you. This is a down zone from the current zoning to IA2 to C2, and the purpose for our request is so we can attract a retail tenant to the property. And as Linda mentioned, this is consistent with your 2017 comprehensive land use that calls for this site to be C2 area retail. And then we also, obviously, as we just discussed, went through the list that was suggested for prohibited uses by Avon, and we've agreed to those. We didn't think the car rental piece would be offensive. Our vision was, obviously, as Greg mentioned, enterprise is already there, like a Hertz or an Avis, but if that causes heartache, we will happily eliminate that as a carve out and include that as a prohibited use if that would make everybody feel better. Our goal is to do something that you all would like to see here, not something that's going to cause heartburn. So with that, again, our goal is to kind of work collaboratively here to get something that works. So we hope that you'll consider us for a favorable recommendation.
Questions for the petitioner?
Can you put the concept design back up there then?
Oh, sorry. Is it? I think I can do that, right?
Okay. So again, just for clarification, I think that road is Casio,
Correct, yes.
and you're not going to go west of the road. Everything's going to be east of that road.
Exactly. So yeah, we would have a curb cut onto Casco, and then we would actually be improving Casco from 36 down to the entry to our development.
Right. And there is no new road cut on 36. It's going to come out of your conceptual plan onto Casco Drive and then go to 36.
Correct, yes. No additional curb cuts will be requested.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any remonstrators who have signed up to speak on this agenda item?
We do not.
Is there anybody present who would like to come forward and speak on this agenda item? If having nobody step forward, the public hearing portion on this agenda item is closed. Discussion.
A follow-up question for staff. So this list of prohibited uses, how did you decide these prohibited uses? Did you look at other developments along 36, like done, and looked at their prohibited uses? Can you talk us through that?
I did not research other rezonings along 36. I went through the list to identify things that would not be appropriate adjacent to residential uses.
Gotcha.
And it's anything outdoor, anything with noise, anything that you wouldn't want to have next to your house, basically. It's just from experience of eliminating the noxious uses.
Gotcha. Do we recall any rezones lately that we've had along 36 where we could kind of use again, maybe this is a practice we could use in the future, so we know we're kind of maybe somewhat consistent, or at least we know what prohibited uses we allowed.
I know we've had a lot of, probably Greg remembers better than I do, but we've had several petitions that came forward where we had prohibited uses that were put in. But I think the way I have looked at it is that these are all case by case. I mean, what is it surrounded by? Is it mostly surrounded by industrial type stuff? Well, then maybe we don't cull some prohibited uses from it because it's in keeping with the neighborhood. I think in this situation, because we do have some residential and we do have some other commercial near there, it's sort of like without creating a buffer, we're trying to soften the impact of having that go. Well, actually, it's a downgrade in the zoning, but creating a softer commercial for the mixed use around it, I guess.
And I agree, it's a case by case, right? Like to your point, just because it's like on the same street doesn't mean it's surrounded by the same things. And again, if those we know off the top of our head, like this is probably maybe for future, but at least it would help me knowing what recent other prohibited uses we've had, especially if it's in the general area. That way we're not picking, different ones each time, if that makes sense.
I think it would be helpful especially if we're going to have a laundry list of prohibited uses from what would otherwise be allowed, to look at the whole, to be able to look at the whole, this is what's allowed, this is what we're removing. I think that would be even more better, listen to me, that would be better than, well, what did we do in this site? Because that could be apples and oranges.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of having the comprehensive list and then comparing it to what we're recommending?
Position, Mason, is we've seen in the last few months, and I've talked to other projects where they're going to put something else on that site, but they don't know what it is yet. So they just want this approved. We don't care about that. And I'm like, wait a minute. We need to start putting in prohibitive uses because we're approving the unknown. And I think we're putting ourselves in a box. So that's why I started saying, hey, we need to start building prohibitive uses in here because otherwise there's 33 things that they can put in there and we may only want 10 of them. So
not to drag things out, but when you ask me how many were on there, do we need to see what is not prohibited to make sure we are doing the diligence that we're kind of talking about?
I'm interested in the commission's temperature on that, because that does, again, I don't know what those other 20 are. And again, in the interest of time, we've got other business tonight. But that does give me some pause not knowing the other 20 that, again, we may want to restrict.
Yeah. So I think, and I agree with your point here. I rely on staff as far as the prohibited uses, but it does enter the question. We don't know these off the top of our head. We're not in the ordinances day in, day out like staff is. And so unless we're going to ask for those tonight, I think we're asking in the future to see what's prohibited and what's allowed. So we have that side by side comparison here. On this one, I mean, as the petitioner said, I would like to include, and I'll be glad to make the motion for the language, that the auto, motorcycle, boat, light truck sales and rentals be prohibited in its entirety.
And I agree with that. And I thank the petitioner for offering up to remove that as well.
Is there any further discussion?
I have a kind of a, just out of curiosity, if they develop that as commercial, are they required to put a sidewalk in front of it or anything? Is there any requirements like that?
The ordinance has sidewalk requirements, yes.
Okay, that's why I was curious, because there isn't one. I was just wondering if they. Okay, thanks.
Any further discussion? If no, I'll entertain a motion.
I'm glad to make a motion. I move that we forward a favorable recommendation for ZA 2402-8447 East US Highway 36. Favorable recommendation to the town council. A zoning map amendment to rezone 0.88 acres from I2 to C2, since it has satisfied all the requirements for zoning map amendment under state law, subject to the commitments outlined within the staff report on file, with the modification that auto, motorcycle, boat, light truck sales or rentals be a prohibited use in its entirety.
Second.
Having heard the motion and a second, we shall take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Lukenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. The Wawa haven't been continued. We now move on to DPR 2207.
Okay, this number might confuse you, like it's 22-07. The Beechwood Center Shops, which is located at 7508 Beechwood Center Road. It is the shopping center that has Royal King and Emmy's, if you're wondering which one it is. They're requesting a approval of a development plan for a new 17,114 square foot retail center with 1,504 square feet of outdoor seating area. You saw a an approved plan in February of 2003, or a development plan review of this in 2003 to provide for a similar structure. It was a slightly larger building in a different configuration without outdoor seating area. The new tenant is desirous of outdoor seating, so they have filed for a revised development plan review. It is Zone C2 in the Tier 3 of the US Highway 36 overlay. This is the zoning of the property. It is C2, located at, it's an end space that's undeveloped of the strip center where Rural King is. This is a clear aerial photo of it, site in white. So it's undeveloped grass area on the north side of the parcel and then existing parking on the south side of the parcel. The proposed development is consistent with the standards of the UDO. They have not requested any waivers. This is the original layout that was approved by the commission in February of 2023. You'll see the buildings proposed are in a box shape here, and then I'll show you the new layout. Shows the outdoor seating area here with the building step back a little from the corner. That's essentially the proposed changes. We had a few revisions of the site plan, but ultimately it is compliant with the standards of the UDO, and we are recommending approval, subject to these 3 standard conditions.
Questions for staff?
So really, at the end of the day, they're just shrinking the building 486 square feet and adding an outdoor seating area.
That is correct.
And there are no waivers?
Correct.
Where is it? Questions for staff? Any further questions for staff? Okay, we'll have the petitioner come forward, please.
My name is Michael Deere, address 1070 Sycamore Court in Greenwood, Indiana. I'm the civil engineer on the site. I really don't have anything to add to staff report. This was approved in February of last year. The reason for the change is they've identified a tenant. The tenant for the large retail space in front is Ale Emporium, and they desire the outdoor seating. We're willing to comply with the staff's recommendations, including the drainage requirements from Crossroads Engineers. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Was there just to refresh my memory, was there a different tenant anticipated?
There
for
were
this
no
space?
tenants identified.
No tenants. Okay, that's what I was thinking, but I wasn't sure, so I've slept since then, so. Questions for the petitioner?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody present who would like to speak on this agenda item? Anyone who signed up for that?
We have Howard Smiley, but I believe he's the architect.
Okay. Don't want to, okay. Would you like to remonstrate against no comments or rebut any no comments? Okay. Okay. Discussion.
I'm glad to see there's still life in the project, and it seems pretty cut and dry.
No waivers, and it meets the conditions.
No waivers, yeah. It's not often we see somebody asking to decrease their footprint. So if there's no further discussion or questions for the petitioner, we'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve DPR 22-07, the 7 Beechwood Center shops, the development plan review to allow for the development of a 1,504 square foot outdoor seating area adjacent to a revised new 17,114 square foot retail center, subject to the conditions proposed by staff within the April 22nd, 2024 Plan Commission meeting presentation. Since it has satisfied all the requirements for a development plan review under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Having heard a motion and received a second, we'll now take a vote.
Kathleen Ransberg,
For?
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Susan,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
Motion carries. Before we move on to new business, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break.
We're looking forward to them coming.
You're hungry, right?
Well, usually they
Okay, moving on to new business, DPR 2403.
DVR 2403 is the Avon Landing Industrial Building Phase 2. This is part of a planned unit development up on 900. The Avon Landing PUD has had 4 approvals so far. The electrical substation, which fronts on 900, the Avon Landing Apartments, and then 2 industrial buildings have already been approved. This one is for 61.96 acres, currently zoned PUD. And there was an amendment to the PUD in December to allow greater than 400,000 square feet of area for the building. This is the site outlined in white. The substation's here, the apartments here, and then the 2 buildings that got approved are up at these 2 sites. This is the proposed layout of the building. There are 2 new roads to be built. So one here along the eastern side of the site, and then one to the south that will actually intersect with 900 north, or 900 east, I'm sorry. The plan in front of you meets all standards of the Avon Landing PUD, with the exception of the number of parking spots. And if you look at this plan, everything in gray is what is proposed. And then they have an area in green over here, which is not proposed to be constructed at this time. It would be there in case they needed it at a future time, but they're not proposing to install it now. And that is the purpose of the waiver. They're proposing 450 parking spots when 498 would be required. In reviewing the waiver request, staff looks to see that the spirit and intent of the ordinance is being met. And we think the spirit and intent of the ordinance is that enough parking is being provided for the users of the building. They're telling us that's all the parking they need, at least right now. And that adjacent properties will not be impacted. So no parking will be overflowed onto other people's properties or onto the street rights of way. If in the future they have more employees that need more parking, they have the ability to provide that parking. So we are in support of the proposed waiver. These are basic elevations of the building. And if you choose to approve the waiver, we are recommending approval based on the 3 standard conditions typically outlined in our staff reports. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
How many parking spaces are in that area that's designated as future parking?
48.
So it would, that additional parking would almost.
Well, I
get
don't know
into-
the exact number. They would be required 48 more. They're just showing where they have opportunity to provide it. I did not count those.
Okay.
Perhaps the petitioner's representative could answer that for you.
48 added to 450 equals required 498.
Right.
So I do have a question. It's been a long time since we looked at this. For some reason, I did not think, remember back when we looked at this begin with, that there was supposed to be an egress on 900.
Yeah, that was my observation as well. Like, I want to say it was presented that there would not be a connection in 900 East, and now this one's being presented that there will be.
Because I don't know what the condition of 900 is to be able to handle that traffic north or south. So maybe a question for the petitioner to ask on that.
Well, that was a question I had for the staff. Is there a commitment or to improve 900 East? Because 900 East is very narrow. I think it was resurfaced maybe within the last year, but it's very narrow, no shoulders, no curbs. And so there would be an increase in traffic. I would presume they would limit semi-traffic. They would want to steer towards Ronald Reagan. If not, that would need to be a condition I would like to impose or anyways, long story short, yeah, that does concern me, 900 East with this connector road.
I understand your concern. I did not do a review of this for the intersection of this with 900, so I would defer to the town manager who might be able to answer that, or the petitioner's representative.
Thanks.
Any further questions for staff? If not, we'll invite the petitioner to come forward.
Hello, I'm Kylie Bright Schuler with American Structure Point, the civil engineer on the project. And we're at 9025 River Road in Indianapolis. Thank you, Linda, for the summary. The only thing I'd like to add on the waiver portion is, yeah, the tenant has said that they do not have the need for that, and there are actually an additional 100 spaces if needed. Right now, it'll be just landscaped, and that's in our landscape plan. But 450 is the need they see currently. To answer the question on County Road 900, so the east-west road and the County Road 900 improvements will follow this submittal, so that'll be next Friday's May 3rd deadline. So you'll see plans for that, and that's been in discussion with Ryan, the town manager, and in discussion with Avon. There's also a traffic study being done right now, studying this proposed traffic of this site, and then also building 1 and building 2 to the north in correlation with also the apartments across the street. So there's a traffic study being done to see if there will be a traffic light needed at the intersection of Logistics Way and Ronald Reagan. And then they will also study the County Road 900 intersection with the east-west road.
What's being, other than the traffic study, I thought you mentioned something before that. What's being submitted to the town next Friday?
The actual plans for the east-west road that you're seeing here, and then County Road 900, there will be improvements to that road, so added lanes, resurfacing for the entire portion in front of our property.
And that would be done as part of this development?
Correct. It's
only in front of your property, not extending north and south to the next intersection?
We are adding the required turn lanes.
Okay.
So
if you go south of 900, you're going to come to the roundabout there.
right, we are not impacting that
How would you not impact that?
because there's a whole property this is north of that roundabout.
So if a truck went south on 900 out of this property, it would come to that roundabout.
Right.
That would impact that roundabout, would it not?
Yes, and that's part of the traffic study. They'll come up and it'll be presented to the town.
Okay, and I'll ask the town manager this, or I'm sure we will, because it's like that roundabout traveling that frequently doesn't seem to be constructed for semi-truck traffic. So, I mean, that's something that I'm concerned about, that I know I want to discuss further with the commission about this before we approve this.
Okay.
To approve your waiver.
Okay, and just to note, these plans are not for County Road 900 or the east-west road. So that would be presented at a month delayed from now. So this wouldn't be necessarily approved, like if you were to approve this, wouldn't be the County Road 900 plans.
Have that information before we would look at this. So we'd have a total picture of everything. So, okay, that answered my question, though. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
And this is warehouse, correct?
Yes.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Is there anyone present who would like to speak on this agenda item? Nobody signed up? Okay, thank you.
Can we ask the town manager come up to talk about 900?
Would the town manager please come forward?
It would be my pleasure. Yes, sir.
So when we looked at this, and our memory is that there was not supposed to be any truck traffic on 900. And maybe it's been a while and don't remember correctly. But 900 is not really constructed to handle truck traffic. And then you got the roundabout that's south of this development that would be, I can't imagine it wouldn't get tore up by any trucks. And unless we prohibit those trucks and somehow stop them, they're going to go down that county road. So this is a discussion we've had several times around our county roads. How do we handle that?
Yeah, so we already have an ordinance that prohibits trucks. So trucks wouldn't be allowed on 900 anyway. Our town code actually has an ordinance that requires all trucks that have to take the shortest route to Ronald Reagan Parkway, Avon Avenue, or US 36. So the shortest route from this building is out to Ronald Reagan Parkway. So I can't say that a truck will never drive on County Road 900 East, but truck traffic should be directed to, and even if Linda put the site plan back up there, if you look at the site, the entrance and exit for the trucks is actually on the northern side. So it wouldn't make sense for trucks who are trying to get to 70 or 74 to actually want to drive south, go to 900, and then come all the way around to get to Ronald Reagan Parkway. It's not the closest route. It wouldn't make sense for a truck to do that. They're going to take the shortest route, go directly to Ronald Reagan Parkway, and whether they're going to 70 or 74, they would use Ronald Reagan Parkway to get to 74. So again, our ordinance prohibits that. You guys, when we actually did this, and there was a traffic study when we originally did the zoning. So this is just a DPR. This isn't a rezoning. So those requirements were already in there.
So they would need to go to Logistics Way and not.
Yeah, they would go to Logistics Way, and that's what, if we pull up the site plan, you'll actually see the entrance. So in the upper, there's the entrance for the trucks that's the check-in for the trucks. So the trucks are going to go out on Logistics Way. So they're not going to want to drive all the way down and drive out to County Road 900 to then go south and try to come all the way back to Ronald Reagan Parkway. That wouldn't make any sense. They're going to follow Logistics Way, and there's a traffic signal that will actually be part of, will eventually, when this building is built and ready to open, the traffic signal will be there as well. So the traffic signal will be the place. The trucks are going to want to go to the traffic signal. They're not going to want to go to the roundabout and travel on 200. And again, we have the ordinance in place already that would prohibit the trucks. That's not the shortest route. They shouldn't be going that way anyway.
And just remind me, because I'm hardly ever on 74, but Logistics Way goes to 74?
Logistics Way goes to Ronald Reagan Parkway, and Ronald Reagan Parkway connects to 74 into 70.
Okay.
So again, that's where the trucks are going to want to go. They're not going to want to go out the back way.
Okay.
And then the other question that I think you and Mason both brought up was the access to County Road 900. And there was actually a requirement that they had to build a road that connected to County Road 900. You guys prohibited other driveways other than the road. So the road has to connect to 900. That's actually in the zoning, and you guys required that. But nobody else. So if you look at the site plan again, there's no access. There's no driveways to 900. You guys prohibited driveway connections to 900, but you actually required a road to be built. So what they're proposing fits perfectly in the zoning that you guys approved.
Are you sure that was us?
I'm positive. I'm 100% positive. It's in there. Now, it may look a little different because you guys, in the original approval, the road was to the north of the project. But actually, through our process and through our economic development work, it actually makes sense for the road to be on the south, because the road to the north of it is in Brownsburg, and it's proposed to be residential. So no one's going to actually use that road. And there's a gas pipeline to the north, and nothing can cross that gas pipeline. So no one would actually use the road if it was to the north of the property. So we've moved it to the south side of the property, which will now accommodate the loading to the traffic to the property to the south as well. So it's actually better for the town. We have one road to take care of instead of more roads. And plus now we're making more traffic go to where we want it to go. So it's actually to our benefit the way that it's being designed now. And we've developed that over the years through this process and working with VTRE and then the Chicago Industrial as well, who wants to develop the property to the south. So
Was this the one we just reviewed a couple months ago?
yes.
Yeah, I would have opposed that one, so.
Well, that's probably why.
So I appreciate you refreshing our memories on this one here. And I know, and I listened to the words that it wouldn't make sense or they're not supposed to. So what I call is administrative control. We have a prohibition on trucks on 900, unless somebody's out there stopping them. How do we, when they violate that, nobody's watching, how do we address that to stop that from happening? Because I'm sure truckers are just like any drivers. They punch in Google and and Google's gonna take them whatever path it comes up with, which sometimes goes in directions you wouldn't expect them to go. Those are things like, how do we manage that so we don't get the truck traffic on 900?
I would think it would be similar to how we managed truck traffic
I'd like to
on
hear
100
Mr. Ryan's,
South.
I'd like to hear Mr. Cannon's response.
Well, there's no magical way to prohibit all vehicles from ever doing it. We want trucks to be able to travel on certain roads on certain times. If you're moving, for example, and you need a moving truck to come to your house, we need that moving truck to be able to drive down that road. So there's no 100% certain. There's also no 100% prohibition of trucks, because that exact reason, if you have a moving truck or if you're having a delivery of something to your house, that truck has to get through your neighborhood or down your street. And so there's no way to 100% prohibit it. So the ultimate answer is the police department has to enforce it. It's difficult to enforce, and the police don't do it a lot, but that is the mechanism. We have written tickets before to trucks that aren't doing it. Typically, we do it through creative design. I mean, that's what we've done on 100 South. There's no way to prohibit a truck from going on 100 South, but we've put up signage and we've designed the road in a way to discourage trucks from going ways we don't want them to go. So typically we use, again, signage, enforcement, creative engineering to try to make it feel uncomfortable that trucks don't want to go ways that they're not meant to go. Again, no way to 100% say, I can't tell you there never will be a truck that will go that way. And we wouldn't want them to do that. If there was an accident or something prohibiting trucks from going that other way, they may have to go the other way. So we need other routes for them to be able to accommodate. The roundabout at 900, while trucks could not stay in the single lane, it was actually designed and has the turning radius capacity for a truck to be able to go southbound to eastbound. So it could still make that movement. It may not stay within its lanes, but it would accommodate those trucks. It's not as if we're going to trap them there and create some kind of an issue.
All right, thank you.
So if I understand correctly, then the petitioner will make improvements to 900 East along the stretch of their property, right?
Correct.
And then is the purpose of the traffic study to determine if there needs to be any additional improvements south of that to 200 North? And if so, like, who would fit the bill for that? Is that the town? Is that a joint operation?
Well, so the traffic study, you want to take it? We'll let them answer it. But again, a traffic study is only going to tell you how much additional traffic is going that way. The road wouldn't necessarily need to be widened, but it would probably fall on the next developer of the property to the south, most of those improvements. So you guys will see this all the time. On a project like this, we may say you have to improve the road that's adjacent to your property. You need to make it 12-foot lanes, the distance of your property. So we typically require that property owner to do it, and then the next property owner would have to do it for their own. Again, in this situation, our expectation is, and once we see the traffic study, it'll verify that mostly it's just car traffic, and the car traffic will be accommodated on the existing road. And again, I think we just paved it last year as well, so the road itself is in decent condition.
Can you remind us, because 900 is a patch quilt of ownership from 36 North, who has the jurisdiction, who has jurisdiction along that stretch of 900?
The town does.
The town does?
Yep.
And how far north and south of that is that?
Our jurisdiction goes, we go all the way down to the fire station to the south on 900. And then our jurisdiction runs all the way up to the north of this property. So that northern property line is our jurisdiction.
Okay.
So this entire segment is ours. Everything north of 200 North is the town of Avon.
So the segment of road that's improved is Avon. The
Correct.
unimproved
Right. And some to the south as well is in the county. And again, I think we've got a bunch of road improvements we're doing down by Costco, as you guys are aware, but most of the other sections, we've already paved our portions or we've improved our portions.
I believe the petitioner has something to add.
Sure, yeah, we are actually adding right turn lanes in, and the improvements actually do go south of our property currently. So we're improving and milling, resurfacing the whole roadway. I think it's 100 feet south of the the taper would be 100 feet south of the drive cut. Currently, the traffic study, so that's the max requirement we would have to do. The traffic study, the result of that would further reduce that if we need. But currently, our design, which again will be in next week's submittal, has 100 foot south of our property line improved.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Discussion?
Just say for the record, I voted against it last time, so
But it's a new day.
it's a new day.
Well, we're here today because they want, the first thing we need to address is the waiver on the parking. The fact that they have, that if necessary, they can add more parking that would exceed the minimum required is nice to hear. I'd hate to see them suddenly be having people fighting for parking spaces because there was no room for expansion after that.
I was going to say, and if we approve the waiver, then the DPR is ministerial and we have to approve the DPR.
Correct. And we need to address the waiver first. Discussion of the waiver?
I agree that it's in the spirit of the intention of the ordinance. If they need 450 spots, because that's how many employees they're going to have, then and they've allowed for expansion, it makes sense.
If there's no further discussion, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll do it.
On the waiver.
Yep. I move that we approve the waiver request of section 4-8DC, parking requirements to allow for 450 parking spaces when 498 parking spaces are required, since it has satisfied all the requirements for waivers under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Having heard the motion in a second, let's take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
For?
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
Motion carries. Having approved the waiver, would anybody like to, or do we want to have any more discussion about the DPR itself? Or are we ready for a motion?
I'm sorry, I apologize. This is purely administrative.
This is
right?
administrative, correct? Ministerial. Anybody want to entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that we approve DPR 2437 Avon Landing Industrial Building Phase 2, a development plan review to allow for the development of 723,840 square feet warehouse subject to the conditions proposed by a staff within the April 22nd, 2024 Plan Commission meeting presentation, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a development plan review under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Second. Okay. Having received a motion and a second,
Catherine Ransberg,
for?
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Dave Kaufman.
4.
And the motion is approved. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Do we have it? Looks like there's a staff report. Oh, no, we already have that. Any other business? No? Any committee reports? There was no BZA meeting, so.
Redevelopment met last week. In addition to approval of presented invoices, we also received the Dan Jones widening update. In addition to resolution 2024-04, the interlocal agreement with Hendricks County.
Okay. Any further committee reports, town council, anything? Well, unless there's anything else we need for the good of the order, this meeting is adjourned.